So yesterday, at the beginning of the mimer, we're not going to review because we're going to have to review it when we get back to answer the question that the Rebbe asked, right? And as we said, there's basically two mimarim here. We started the second part, the parenthetical discussion on simcha and joy that's in the middle of this mimer. It started because the Rebbe was talking about the simple people saying Tehillim with tears. The Rebbe then says, but that aveda of merirus, bitterness, is not relevant to this generation. Okay, again, two different levels of tshuva. Tshuva tata, lower level tshuva. Tshuva ilah, upper level tshuva. Tshuva tata is understood as tshuva merirus, bitterness. I'm embittered by the fact that I've distanced myself from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that my soul is feeling the pain of that distance. Tshuva misimcha is the incredible simcha of the ability to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and be enveloped in his hug. It's called bebechinash nashikin. It's kisses, actually, right? Okay, nashika is a kiss. So the Rebbe says that the first level of Aveda works, right? Meaning that level called merirus, it works. If we do it properly, it will work. If I truly feel a certain embitterment by virtue of the fact that I've done something that has caused negative results. So if I relate to that properly, so then I can bring about a positive change. The problem is the Rebbe says we won't relate to it properly. We'll relate to it the wrong way. What'll happen? Right, we talked about it yesterday. Can we give that the camera down there? All right, we said, I'm just going to read second paragraph, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, I'll start from the fourth line because we just did a couple of lines of that. Amnam, however, inyan mariru shebetshuva eino shayich b'doreinu zeh achlan is not relevant to this generation. Daradikvus of the Mashiach, the generation on the heels of Mashiach. Why? Kevin sheb'doreinu ein lanu kayach le'inyan marirus. We don't have the power, the strength for the inyan marirus. What's going to happen instead? Talked about it yesterday. I'm the one with the short-term memory loss. You guys should remember this. We learned it yesterday, for goodness sake. Oh, thank you very much, Shimon. You've saved me, my whatever.
So that only happens in like the final generation before Mashiach?
Evidently, that's an issue now, right? I mean, look around at the world, right? Should, objectively, do people have a harder life or a better life than anybody else that has ever lived on this little ball floating? Basically, it's not incomparable in terms of how much better our lives are. And I say our, I mean all 8 billion of us. Right? When I was growing up, and you can be my witness to this. When I was growing up, all they talked about was the scare tactic that the media was using to get people scared was starvation. There's not enough food and everybody's going to die because we don't have enough food. That was the scare tactic in that generation. There's a new one now, climate control, whatever it happens to be. True, not true, I'm not saying, but they send out a message that's supposed to make people nervous. The same way. Make people nervous. Okay, in those days it was starvation. Right? So now, see these poor trees, these trees give up their lives for our pieces of paper and they just, don't lose your paper. No one, Baruch Hashem, starvation has gone down to beautifully low levels. There are very few people starving. There are still, just too many. If there's one, that's too many. Oh, exactly. Yeah. I was just about to say that, right? That there's a bigger health problem. People eat too much and they're fat. Okay, there you go. That's pretty interesting, right? Because there's just a lot of bounty in the world, right? I remember when the Russians came to Eretz Yisrael, 35 years ago, the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, when Russia opened up, when the Soviet Union fell, and Russia reappeared, so about 1 million Russians came. Should have seen their faces when they walked into Machne Yehuda Shuk, when they walked into the market. They never saw anything like this in their life. Row upon row upon row of bounty and food and vegetables and fruit. They just never saw anything like it. Because in Russia, there wasn't anything. It was really, no one knew, but it was empty. So we have unbelievable bounty. the people have basically good lives, and yet people seem to be walking around depressed. I don't think you burn down Minnesota if you're happy.
Yeah.
I don't think happy people do that.
But is the text saying that this is what's going to happen to the generation before Mashiach? That would be this.
That's our generation. Yeah, the Rebbe's referring to our generation.
Okay, right.
Rebbe always refers to our generation as that because that's who we are. So that's evidently a problem specific to this generation. It's just interesting when you look around, you see that why aren't people happy? Like, what's their problem? Well, because, I don't know because. I tell you what, let's go a little further in the Maimon and we'll talk about it a little more. But in the meantime, the Rebbe said that we won't do that avodah, that service, that aspect of tshuva properly. We'll mess it up. And what's the difference? We'll focus on ourselves and not on the improper behavior. I'm no good. That's not true. I am good. I just did something that's not. That's completely different than saying I'm no good because I did something that's not good. We all do things that aren't good. That's true. Does that mean I'm not good? No. It doesn't mean I'm not good. It means that I did something that's not good. Okay, and if I focus on that aspect of it, then I can actually change it properly and successfully. But if what happens if I focus on the negative expressions of my life in order to fix them, but if I focus on those, what's going to happen in our generation, the Rebbe says? We'll just get depressed. And then we'll dig ourselves a deeper hole. Okay. Now, the Rebbe didn't say that. The Rebbe said we don't have koyach. And we mentioned this yesterday. The teachers of our generation who heard this mimer have explained that's what the Rebbe means. Okay. So what do we need? The Rebbe says, we need strengthening and encouragement. Which seems to have, that's also modern educational methods. Right, are generally much more positive. We're not smashing kids over the head with a ruler, over the knuckles. Don't do it. Right? What do? We're trying to encourage them to be better. Now, that can go to, like anything, that can go to such great extremes that they're never told that that everything they do is good. That's not true. Right? You can mention to a child that what they did wasn't such a good thing to do, and that you're surprised because they're so amazing, and why did they do that? Amazing people like you don't have to do things like that. That's a different thing. That's very different than saying you're a jerk. We talked about it yesterday, how we might talk to ourselves. Okay, let's go further. Therefore, in our generation, and again, we said the Rebbe is going to give 3 reasons why simcha, joy, is the focus of our generation. Must be joyous. Again, focusing on the positive, focusing on no matter where I am and what I might have done or not done, in the future I can express things in a more positive way. So too regarding the saying of Tehillim. Now the Rebbe is mentioning this simply because he mentioned the people saying Tehillim with the broken heart. So today when you say Tehillim, Shemavur ba'maimer, as it's explained in the Maimer, the previous Rebbe that we saw yesterday, Shamiris Tehillim, that the reciting of Tehillim of these very, very holy, simple people that the Rebbe mentioned at the beginning of our paragraph. He believed nishbars with a broken heart, and that's borrowing the terms of David HaMelech in Tehillim itself. David HaMelech talks about the broken heart. How do you do a Piskam Rabbeinu Nesienu? It's well known. The statement of our Rebbeim, Shenimsar, that was given over to us, it was given to us by, and we talked about what that means yesterday, went through all of the Rashi Tevis, all of the abbreviations, right? That the previous Rebbe, who was the leader of our generation, told us this information, Shekfar Nidpas, and it's already printed, which means it's something obviously for public consumption if it's printed. There are things that the Rebbeim tell us in a Farbrengen in 770, so the Rebbe would Farbrengen, and he'd say something. Okay, so theoretically, you might think that it's for the people in the room. Well, if the Rebbe wants it printed, it's clearly not for the people in the room. It's for anybody who happens to come in contact with that piece of paper. So that's anybody. All right, so the Frierdiker Rebbe printed this, and what was that famous statement? And we'll have to talk about it. We'll do it as quickly as we can because it's a long topic, but a very, very important topic. Trach gut wird sein gut. Think good, and it will be good. Hainu, shamachshava, be'ofen shel tov. A positive thought. He atzma mevia ima es tov. It itself brings with it good. a positive attitude will produce better results than a negative attitude. Now, every doctor will tell you that about patients. Well, it's very interesting. Meaning, it's obviously it's a very spiritual idea, right? Because in physicality, what difference does it make? I'm thinking positive, I'm not thinking. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Well, no, right? Why? Well, because of some other higher reality. But that positive thought, the doctor will tell you that the patient who has a positive feeling about the outcome is a patient that will do better than the patient who has a negative feeling about the outcome. And that's even proven in tests with placebos, where they're not even giving real medicine to anybody. Right? If it's double blind, so even the doctor doesn't know who's getting real medicine and who's not getting real medicine. So the doctor also his or her attitude isn't based on them knowing what should be, based on the fact that someone's getting medicine. But doctors will tell you that patients with a positive personality per se, relative to this particular reality that they're involved in, do better. Okay, now what does it mean? The Rebbe explains this at great length in a very, very famous sikh in Lakutei Sichos, first sikh in Parsha Shmeis in Chelik Lamed Aleph or Lamed Vav, I always forget. It's Lamed Aleph Shmeis and Lamed Vav Shmeis. I think it's Lamed Aleph. The Rebbe explains the idea of Trach Good V'Zayin Good. Trach Good V'Zayin Good means think good and it will be good, which is the source of the idea called bitochen, trust. Right? Not emuna. Emuna means faith. Emuna means I believe God runs the world. Okay. So then what? So then I know that everything that happens comes from God. So on some level, I therefore understand that everything that happens is ultimately good, even though it might be a level of good that I can't see. Right? It might be a level of good that's only good in very high spiritual levels, but down here it looks like a disaster. Right? People being sick, people passing away, those are not things that you and I would call revealed good. Okay. So what would we like? What do we pray for all the time? What are we davening for? Revealed good. Good? Everything that happens is good because it comes from God. But I want revealed good. Right? Good that I can understand, not only good that God can understand, because there's levels of good that I can't understand. Right? Why? I'm limited. And I say it's all of us. Okay, so I want revealed good. What's one of the ways of bringing that about in our lives? The Rebbe says in an unbelievable sikh, it's absolutely astounding. Trach good. Think positively about the outcome of this event, and the outcome will be positive. Think negatively about the outcome of this event, so then who knows what's going to happen? Luck of the draw. But you actually have a certain amount of control. In the sikh, it looks like total control, to be perfectly honest, and it's really quite challenging. Total control over the result of any particular situation by virtue of how you relate to it. Trach good, think good. What does that mean? What's that positive thought? And that is also in that sikh, the Rebbe also relates it to tshuva, to our relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, not just how we're doing on the stock market. That if I realize that absolutely everything is dependent on God's will, there is nothing that can happen unless God wills it to happen or allows it to happen, which means that's also part of God's will. So if something negative happens, that's also a function of God's will, and I have to somehow deal with that in that context, as hard as that might be. Okay, but we're not talking after the fact, we're talking before. Bitochen, trust, is the avodah, is the service, is the work that has to be done before something happens, as opposed to afterwards. After it happens, what's the avodah? Gamzu l'teiva, Rabbi Akiva. Also, this is good. Mm-hmm. Right? Okay, not Rabbi Akiva, I'm sorry. Nachamish Gamzu. Right? Also, this is good. Okay, meaning if something negative happens after the fact, what is emunah? What does faith in God say? Well, I don't see the good, but this is also okay. I might see it in the future, but I don't see it now. Okay. What about before? I'm in the midst of some reality, right? So I'm in the context of our sikha, and this is what the Rebbe talks about there. There, the Rebbe is actually talking specifically about a story with Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? Moshe Rabbeinu being afraid of the fact that Paro is going to find out that he killed the Egyptian. And if you don't know the story, so you'll run into it pretty soon in the weekly parsha at the beginning of Shmeis, beginning of the book of Exodus. So Moshe kills a Mitzri, and Moshe is afraid that people will know that he's afraid because people know about it. And actually, Paro does find out about it, and Paro tries to kill Moshe, and there's a miracle, and Moshe runs away. The Rebbe has an amazing explanation of that whole story. The whole reason that Paro found out about Moshe doing that is because Moshe didn't have bitachon, Moshe didn't have absolute trust that since he had done something positive, there would be no negative hashlachot, no negative reaction in this world. It was his lack of bitachon. He was 15, 16 years old. We'll give him a pass. Okay, fine. In other words, the positive thought will bring about a positive result. Why? Because the Kadosh Baruch Hu runs the world. And if I throw my lot completely on the Kadosh Baruch Hu, that does not mean that I don't do what I have to do in Olam Hazeh. That means I go to work, I do whatever I have to do. If it means bringing about change in myself, I do all the hard work necessary to bring about the change. But what's my basic position? It will be successful. Why? Because the Kadosh Baruch Hu runs the world and he wants it to be successful. And if I throw my lot completely in God's hands, his response is, so to speak, the reward for this incredible bitachon, for this incredible trust in the Kadosh Baruch Hu, is that things will work out properly. That's it's a long sikha and it's something that you'd have to see inside, but I'm doing my best to do it as quickly as I can. Trach gut wird sein gut. Positive thought will bring a positive result. Okay, so relative to tshuva, what does that mean? That means rather than dwell on my failures and on my lackings, I should be focusing on my ability to accomplish that which I can, which I want to accomplish, and understand, have absolute faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu that it'll help me accomplish that, and I will. That's called bitachon, trust. Bitachon isn't some general reality. Emunah is a more general state of being. Does a person have emunah or not? Meaning, does he believe in a Kadosh Baruch Hu or not? And that doesn't, that doesn't mean he, if someone asks him on the street, "You believe in God?" He says yes, so he's on the, he's on the positive side in the little box at the bottom of the page, right? And the survey. I mean, someone who truly, honestly lives godliness in their life, is trying very, very hard to bring God into their life and be conscious of God's presence in their life. Okay, that's called emunah, faith. Okay, and that's something that a person works on and can theoretically have. Now, it's really something that we have naturally. Why? Because our neshama has absolute and total connection to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. That being said, I have to bring that reality into my conscious being, and that's called emunah. Emunah is the power of the soul that I have. Everyone has. The question is, can I bring that power of my soul into my conscious reality? And if a person is successful at that, then we call them a believer, so to speak. These words sound funny in English. We call them a ma'amin. The Rebbe's wife, when asked about her husband, said, "My man is a maimin. My husband is someone who believes." Okay, fine. That's a state of being. Bitachon, trust, is a response to a particular reality. It's an avodah relative to a particular state where, if I work very hard on the idea of trach gut wird sein gut, that this is going to turn out okay, and that's my avodah, and I have not a shadow of a doubt that any other result will happen, the reward, so to speak, for that incredible bitachon will be the positive result. So the story that the Rebbe tells us about someone who was sick, right, that they went to the Tzemach Tzedek and asked for a bracha, and the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitch Rebbe, answered them, trach gut wird sein gut. Think good, it'll be good. Have a positive. Don't have not a shadow of a doubt that this sickness isn't going to go away, and it'll go away. Okay, that's the avodah. That's the challenge of a patient. A hard challenge. All right? So when the doctor comes in and tells you the good news, that isn't what gives you trust. Hopefully that'll be a result of the trust. That's hard. But if God runs the world, then that's real. If God doesn't run the world, then that's silly. But he does run the world. And that's the basis of the bitachon. And that's why the bitachon works, because the Kadosh Baruch Hu says, if you have such absolute, complete, and total trust in me, based on your very powerful belief in me, in this particular situation, then I'll make it happen the way you want to make it happen because of that incredible trust you have in me. That's the reward for such a thing. Okay, so now what about my own battle against some particular aspect of my life that I'd like to change? Okay, so have a positive attitude that I can change that, and it's going to be changed, and I'm going to do the work necessary to bring about that change. and be so happy about that you're actually throwing a party before you even started the work, celebrating the success that's going to be at the end. Many years ago, it's going to be 16 years in about a month. 16 years ago, I had to undergo a rather serious operation. If it didn't work, I wouldn't be teaching you today. So when I was talking to a very close friend, and he said, the night before you go into the hospital, make a farbrengen and celebrate the success of it. So we did. I wasn't allowed to drink mashka because of what I was going to be going through the next day. Right? I was there a month. It was a fun time. But we made a farbrengen the night before. Went to the hospital Monday morning. So Sunday night we made a farbrengen, and a bunch of friends came, and they all drank l'chaim. So I sipped a little Smirnoffs. I didn't want them to get too mad at me in the hospital when I showed up. So I think they told me not to eat, drink. There was all sorts of rules about what I was supposed to do before I showed up. So we made it for bringing. It wasn't my idea. That's why I can tell you about this. Celebrating the success of the whole thing before it happened. Why not? It's going to happen. Why? Because the Eibishter wants it to happen if I want it to happen. If I really believe that he's in charge. Okay, so when it comes to my relationship with him, then, meaning, if I'm talking about a financial matter, if I'm talking about, I applied for 3 jobs, and trach gut wird sein good, I have absolute, complete, and total trust that I'm going to get job A. Now, theoretically, I could get job A, right? I mean, if I do that properly, I'll get job A. But how do I know that job A is the best job for me? I don't. So that might be misplaced bitachon. I might not involve I might just say, have more what's called emunah. I might say what? I applied for A, B, and C, and whichever one the Eibishter decides I'm going to get, and that's fine. Because it might be that A pays me more, but the people there are absolutely horrible, terrible, nasty people, and I'll be miserable all day working with them. I don't know that. Right? So that might be an improper scenario in which to invoke this avoda, this service of bitachon. If you trachot v'zayin, I'm getting job A, the Eibishter runs the world, and that's what I want, and I trust him completely that that's what's going to be, you'll get job A. But that's a silly thing to do, because how do I know that job A is good for me? Right? Okay. So in certain situations, it might be misplaced, which is really very interesting. Emunah is always in place. Faith, always. Bitachon is a particular aveda. Aveda means service. And I use the word aveda from now on. A particular aveda for a particular situation. And I have to wonder whether or not it's reasonable for this situation. There were great rabbis in the time of the Second World War who decided that their aveda was to express their mesiras nefesh, their self-sacrifice, and die with their students. As opposed to, interestingly enough, the Chassidish Rebbeim and some of the big Litvisher rabbis who wanted to get out, got out. The Belzer Rebbe got out. The Lubavitcher Rebbe got out. 2 Lubavitcher Rebbes got out. Satmar Rebbe got out. Zanzer Rebbe got out. Why? Maybe their bitachon is pretty real and they managed to figure out how to do that. Whereas your average Jew just might not have the ability to overcome that darkness with bitachon. Just too much to ask. I mean, it's theoretically possible, yes, but whoa. Whereas, interesting enough, the big tzaddikim, all the ones who wanted to get out, got out, pretty much. Right? There were those there were Rabbanim who made it to America and went back to Europe. So I'm going to die with my students.
During the war?
During the war. But right before. When it was pretty obvious what was happening. It was dangerous. They got out because it was dangerous. They went back to be with their students. Meaning, what did they decide their avodah was? Not bitachon. Mesiras nefesh, self-sacrifice. You agree with that or disagree with that? I don't think anybody cares. It's not my call. Okay. But it's amazing. It's interesting. Right? The Bluzha V'Rav, all sorts of amazing stories about him and how he got out. Someone wrote a book called Hasidic Stories of the Holocaust. And a lot of the stories about him, because she interviewed him, but he lived in New York until he was it was late 90s. He passed away 10, 15 years ago. Very special, maybe more. A special rough. So he tells some stories about what went on with him and one of the amazing stories he tells, standing by a ravine, and the Nazis, Yamach Shemam, were standing in a line ready to shoot all the Jews who were standing at the ravine. They were just going to fall into the ravine. What did the Nazis say? Anybody who wants to jump over the ravine now to save their lives can. Now, of course, you couldn't jump over the ravine. It was just a nasty joke. The Blue Rav, he was probably 40-something. Right? And he wasn't an athlete. He wasn't going to take Dr. November's, sit up and push up challenge. That wasn't where he was holding in life, right? So he had yet been in the U.S. Army, Doc. So he turned around and he jumped over. So when he got to the other side, there was a 20-year-old boy next to him. So the 20-year-old said, "You're an old man. How did you get here?" He said, "I held on to my father's coat and he carried me across." His father wasn't in this world anymore. So then the Blue Shiraz said, "Well, how did you get over here?" He said, "I held on to you." He jumped over with this kid on his back. He didn't know the kid was on his back. He just turned around and jumped. Trach good, v'tzayin good. I'm making it to the other side. My father will help me. I don't know how you do that. I don't believe it can happen. I'm limiting myself. I'm limiting reality. It did happen? I don't know. He said it happened. Could it? Yes. Did it? I assume so. I don't know. I mean, I wasn't there. How would I possibly know? But he was there to tell the story. So that's emunah. That's bituchen. Absolute, complete, and total trust in the Eibishter that it's going to be good. Revealed good, not good. God has this strange idea of what good is sometimes. When you open the newspaper and it tells you about how many, not the news, but whatever, you open the news and it tells you how many soldiers passed away yesterday. So that's called good on some level, but you and I don't understand it and we don't want that. It's not the good we want. We want revealed good. The Rebbe always refers to as Tova Nira v'Nigla, seen and revealed. That's the good we daven for. What you and I are called good. You and I call good, that's called being healthy, having a parnasa, having children, enjoying life, that's good. The opposite is not so good. Well, it's good somehow, but somewhere, but we don't want that good. Okay, and that's bitachon. So what's the focus of our avodah in tshuva? Absolute, complete bitachon, trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he wants me to come close to him so that if I do the work to come close to him, I'll succeed. Rav Lezer Nanas was a chassid who lived in this town for the last 30 years of his life. He came here when he was 70, after spending 20 years in Siberia. The Russians referred to him as Subota, which means Shabbos, because in 20 years in Siberia, he was never Mechal Shabbos or any of the holidays. He was quite an amazing guy. So he lived here in Yerushalayim. So, and he was very accessible. So my wife used to learn with him. She learned with him much more than I did, but I also learned with him a little bit. I got to know him and spent some time bringing with him. And bringing was listening to his stories about Russia and also Lubavitch. He learned in Lubavitch. So he said what allowed him to get, what saved him in the camps? He said, what killed people in the camps? He said, what killed people in the camps is you couldn't sleep at night because what you saw in the day was so horrible and you were wondering if it was going to happen to you next, and so it was hard to sleep at night. And so you'd be tired the next day. And that went on for a while. And at a certain point, if you were working in the forest and you fell down because you were so tired, they would just shoot you and leave you there. That was life in the Gulag. Wonderful people. The minimal estimate of how many people Stalin killed in the Gulag is 20 million. That's the minimal. Solzhenitsyn says it's closer to 60 or 70. Whatever it is, it's too many people. So it was a rough life. So Rav Lezer said, why did I, he liked to speak in Hebrew. So he said, why did I make it? Yashanti katinok. I slept like a baby every night on his piece of wood. Why? because before he got, when in 1930, when the previous Rebbe was leaving Russia, so he went to see the previous Rebbe, and on the way out of Russia, the previous Rebbe told Laser that he would get out of Russia and make it to Eretz Israel. He'd make it to Israel. They made it in 1967, right before or after the war, I'm not sure, right before or right after. So he said, I knew that I was not going to die in the camps because the Rebbe gave me a bracha to make it to Eretz Israel, so I knew I was going to be okay, so I slept like a baby every night. Now that's also called bitachon, right? Because he had emun in the Rebbe, and also he believed that when the Rebbe said that, that's what it's going to be, and so that gave him tremendous bitachon, absolute trust that it was going to be good. He was going to make it out of the camps, and indeed he had a 10-year sentence. The last day of the 10-year sentence, they had a little kangaroo court in the gulag, and they sentenced him to another 10 years. And he was very happy. He was very proud of what he was in for. It was all made up, of course, but he said, "I'm a terrorist. I'm a terrorist." Because they said that he wanted to blow up a building, so he was really into this. That I'm a terrorist. I was going to blow up a building in Russia, so he didn't blow up a building in Russia, of course. So he spent 10 years there, and then they gave him another 10 years, and he got out. Spent another few years in Russia, and then about another 10 years he and his wife spent in Russia, and then they both got out. Unfortunately, those were the years he might have had children, so they had no children. He had one child who passed away right after birth, so he had no children. He had a lot of children because we were all his kids, because he had a lot of people who looked up to him and spent a lot of time with him. He couldn't hear, so when you went to his apartment, you'd press it. It was ingenious. I don't know who thought of this idea. You'd press the buzzer and a light went on above the door. His hearing was very bad. He wouldn't have heard the buzzer, but he saw the light, and so he'd come over, he'd shuffle over and open the door. He lived to be 99 and 9 months. When he was 70, he went into the Rebbe for Yechidus. He hadn't met the Rebbe as Rebbe. He was in the Gulag the whole time. He was in Russia. Went into the Rebbe for a private audience, and he walked with 2 canes. And the Rebbe said, "Laser, you look like an old man. Why are you walking with 2 canes?" So he said, "Well, I'm 70. So the Rebbe said, "You're not 70. So he wasn't going to argue with the Rebbe. He just said, this was 1967. He said, I was born in, 18 whatever, 70 years before, you do the math, right? 1890. So the Rebbe said, you call 20 years in Siberia living? He lived to be 99. He always understood the Rebbe gave him back 20 years. That's how he understood it. The Rebbe said, you call that life? That was just on the side. We'll give you that back. Made it to 99. When he used to go to, he had heart problems, when he used to go to the cardiology department in my wife's a doctor, so he used to love talking to us about his medical issues. He just got such a gnaw talking to his doctor student about everything medical. So when he would go to Hadassah cardiology, he'd have a checkup at least once a year. He always used to take these pills. He'd get a little tired. He threw a pill in, it would give him a jolt, and he would then keep learning with it. So glycerin or something, I think it's called. Right. So he said the Hadassah is a learning hospital. It's a university hospital, which means that as a patient, you have to agree that students might be in with the doctor when the doctor's talking to you. That's part of the deal. Okay. Whenever he came, all of the students were there with the head of cardiology was his doctor, and the head of cardiology would tell the people doing rounds in cardiology when he was there every year, right, at least once a year, that this man, physically, there is absolutely no reason based on his cardiological situation that he should be alive, and he is alive solely because of a bracha of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and you should know as doctors that it's not all about us. That's what the head of cardiology would say to the students when Laser was sitting there. Amazing, right? That's a real education for the city. Yes, you're going to do your best to take care of them, but there's a God, and it's ultimately up to him. I'm not saying the Rebbe's God. The Rebbe just knows how to pull the strings. Okay? So that was Laser. Trach good, v'zayin good. That's why Laser made it through the camps. Hainu, shemachshava be'efen shel tov. The positive thought, brings with it the good. And so the Rebbe's talking about the relative to tshuva, the fact that we have a positive attitude in our ability to change. Again, I'm sorry for going off the page, but it's just such an important idea. The Frierdiker Rebbe has a very, very famous story. I'm not going into the story. It's a long story, but based on the story, what does the Frierdiker Rebbe teach us? He tells the story about a person who had a very good imagination and imagined a certain situation to happen. right? So based on, and then he did tshuva, serious tshuva. And the Frierdiker Rebbe says, what is it that gave this man the power to do such an incredible tshuva? His vivid imagination, that he could imagine himself different. If I can't imagine myself different, I can't change. So the first thing I have to do is imagine myself different. And then bring that into reality. Have the absolute confidence that that can happen. Right? You have certain situations you find difficult to deal with. Okay, watch the movie of you dealing with that differently. Imagine you're dealing with that situation differently. Okay, now bring the movie into real life. Make that movie happen. Next time you're in that situation, react the way you did in the movie, not the way you usually react, which is something that bothers you and might even depress you. Like, oh, you get very upset because you always do that, and you're so upset. Why did I do that again? No. So watch the movie. Imagine yourself different, and then you can be different. So I need two things. I have to imagine where I want to go. I have to know where I want to go if I want to get there, and then realize that I can get there. Trach good, v'zayin good. And that should be the way we do tshuva, as opposed to beating myself up that I'm so bad that I as a friend of mine always says about me as a joke, he says, you're so low you have to look up to see down. Right? So we don't have to say that about ourselves. Friends can say it as a joke. He's still my friend, so I guess he doesn't think it's true. I do, but he doesn't. There doesn't have to be any notion of bitterness. Now, interesting enough, the Rebbe is saying bitterness, right? Meaning that which would work. The Rebbe doesn't say atzvus. He doesn't say depression. He says bitterness, meaning that doesn't have to be part of the formula to bring about change. To break my heart over what happened. The way we can bring about the proper response is to fix what happened, as opposed to break my heart regarding what happened. Fix it. If it involves another person, so that obviously involves going to them and apologizing. The saying of Tehillim with a bitterness of his soul and with tears, unasin tzedakah, and giving tzedakah. Now, obviously, the Rebbe doesn't think you shouldn't give tzedakah, but the general formula in the realm of merirus is that Tehillim with tears, etc. The Rebbe says that is not necessarily the formula for our generation. Did it work for previous generations? Absolutely, 100%. Will it work for our generation? Probably not, the Rebbe says. That's not the way to go. Simcha. So saying Tehillim with tears? No. Saying Tehillim? Absolutely. Say Tehillim. And when you're saying Tehillim, what are you focusing on? All the greatness of God that you're describing, how amazing God is, and incredible, and so uplifting to actually have a relationship with Him, and the possibility of a relationship with Him. Maybe my relationship isn't what I want it to be, beside it, but He's sitting there waiting. He's just waiting for me to come. And He's in no way, shape, or form saying, no, no, he did such and such and such, and says, I don't want him here. That's not true. It just doesn't happen. So, that's pretty uplifting. Because the positive thought itself will bring with it good, vet zayin good. Now you'll see the Rebbe as a chassid. We always relate to the Rebbe as a Rebbe, but the Rebbe is a chassid of the previous Rebbe. Now you see what it means to be a chassid. Look at what the Rebbe says in this line. And since there is the promise of our Rebbeim, the Tzemach said it, the third Rebbe who the story was about, and the previous Rebbe who told the story. That when the thought is positive, it will be good. It's absolutely clear that that's the way it'll be. That's a chassid talking. That's the Rebbe as chassid, not the Rebbe as Rebbe. The Rebbeim said it, so that's the way it is. Now, go do it. Okay. Ubefrat, particularly, shemuval ze, it's brought relative to this. Sipur Tzemach Tzedek, the story. This is the story that I mentioned earlier. Sipur Tzemach Tzedek, the story of the Tzemach Tzedek. Shekein haya b'feil, it actually happened. She'amar Tzemach Tzedek le'echad ha'chasidim, that the Tzemach Tzedek said to one of the chasidim, and it was regarding a health matter, which the Rebbe is going to say. Trach good, v'zayin good. Think good, it'll be good. V'chein haya, and it was. Person got better, Baruch Hashem. Now, there's all sorts of questions about that you can ask in terms of how exactly it works. Who's supposed to have the positive thought? Now, in this case, that story, the positive thought seems to be the people who care about this person as opposed to the person himself, which is really very interesting. It might be that person, I mean, if chas v'shalom, a person's in a coma, so then that person isn't going to have much avoided to do. Okay, so it might be the people around. It seems, unless the story was that the Rebbe told them to go tell him. I don't know. It's unclear, but it can involve everybody. Everybody should have a positive attitude towards it all. But again, the doctor wasn't in the room when I said this the first time. Doctors will tell you that a patient with a positive outlook always does better. It's just true. That's just the way it works, right? This is an actual story that happened. I mean, it's a true idea, but it's also an idea it happened in Gashmias. It happened in the physical world. Ubefrat, and particularly, Shamadubar Sham, that which is spoken about there in the story, Hubrias Aguf Begashmias, is about physical health in physical reality, which is obviously very important. Shemizem Muvan, from this it's understood, the Kol Shekain V'Kal V'Chomer. Kol Shekain V'Kal V'Chomer is an a fortiori argument, which of course none of us know what that means, because what's an a fortiori argument? It's a Kal V'Chomer. What do you mean? Kal V'Chomer means that I can extrapolate from A to B, because if the situation is such an A, then obviously it would be that way in B. Okay, that's called a Kal V'Chomer in the Gemara. Okay, so for instance, if I have a situation where something in a Shabbos is more strict than Yom Tif, okay, so then if I learn a certain strictness that applies to Yom Tif, it's reasonable to assume that it'll apply to Shabbos, because Shabbos is generally more strict than Yom Tif, so that's Kal V'Chomer. If it applies in Yom Tif, so all the more so it would apply in Shabbos. Okay, that's called the Kal V'Chomer. So that's what the Rebbe is saying here. All the more so, L'Gavi Brias Baruchnes. This story is about physical health, which is important, but not absolutely important, because after all, if a person passes away, so that's sad for us left behind, but for that person, they've evidently finished what they were supposed to do, and they go to a very beautiful place, right? And they don't die. There's no such thing as death. The body stops being there, but what's there? The neshama, the soul. Who's the person really? The person really is their soul. Right? Their soul was there before there was a body, and their soul is there after there's a body. Okay, so that's who they really are. So they've simply transferred to a different state of reality. They were in a physical reality, now they're in a spiritual reality. Okay, so that's hard for us left behind. But for them, it's a very pleasant experience. My roommate in Yeshiva, who's 19 years old, his father passed away. The Rebbe wrote the family a letter, and in the letter, the Rebbe said that the passing of a loved one is only difficult for those left behind. For the one who passed away, it's a beautiful experience. And they had tremendous comfort from that, as you can imagine. Okay, that doesn't make it any easier that they're not around. You want them around, you like them. But physical health is obviously very, very important, but there's something more important, all the more so physical health. Right? So, and that's what we're talking about in this mimer. Physical health, tshuva, coming close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Mikev and Shinyaz and Isparsa. And since this was publicized, Al Yedei Nasi Doreinu, by the leader of our generation, the previous Rebbe, Va'ad Shekvar Nitpas, to such an extent that it's actually printed, move on, it's understood, Sheyesh Bezeh, there is in this story, Heira, an instruction, L'kol Echad Va'achas Misol, to every single Jew. Otherwise, it's not why print it. If it's not relevant to me, so then why do I have to hear about it? No. It's relevant to every single one of us, and that's why the previous Rebbe wanted it printed. Trachud v'zayin good. Positive attitude will bring about positive results. When the Alter Rebbe talks about this in Tanya, what's the mushal he brings? Famous mushal? Two wrestlers wrestling each other. One's depressed and one's happy. Who's probably going to win? The one who's got a positive.
And the happy one is weaker, right?
He said, even though he might not be as strong, right? But I mean, who's going to win? Right? The one with the. Generally, in that whole reality of sport, which is such a huge thing in the world, what's the difference between the winners and the losers? It's usually in their head, right? The winners just know how to win, and the losers know how to lose, right? Are they both good at what they do? Yeah, they're both really good at what they do. Right? They're amazing at what they do. They're incredible. Right? But the winner has a slightly different attitude. He has what we might call a psychological advantage. Right? If you're playing the best you possibly can, and Roger Federer isn't playing the best he possibly can, there is a chance you might beat him. And the chance depends on one thing and one thing only. Psychologically, do you believe in your ability to beat him or not? Because if you don't, you're going to lose. Because he thinks he can win. That's why he is who he is, or was. Okay. That's just it, because it's not just one-on-one. That's the most, incredible one-on-one battle. It's just all in the head. Well, okay, so we'll call that psychological, fine, but that's also a certain trust in my ability to do something, and then I can do it. And if I don't trust my ability to do it, if I have certain doubts, then I'll probably flub the backhand down the line that would have saved the match. I'll miss by 3 inches. If I have no doubt that I'm going to hit this thing, I'll hit it. And that's what always amazes you about the guys who are good and the guys who are almost that good. How does that guy always do that? Right? Okay. And the football quarterback does it with 85,000 people screaming at him that he should fail because he's in the other team's park. That must be a lot of energy against you. Somehow he's able to block that out and do what he knows he can do. Then he does it. To a certain degree, that's what the Rebbe's talking about. Obviously, the Rebbe's talking about it on a much deeper and more spiritual level, but that also is true. That's that a belief in myself and my ability to do something. Then I can do it. Right? Even if there's a lot of energy pushing against me. Okay. Torah good, v'zayin good. And that should be our attitude in tshuva. Can we change? Yes. Okay, so let's make it happen. Now it's true, we need the imagination to imagine who I would be different. What would I change, or how would I change? How would I react to that situation? I can't imagine. Well, I can't make that happen. From all of this, 5th line, it's understood that the Aved has to be Mesech Simcha. The Neisef Lemavur B'Igeres Tshuva. Now the Rebbe is going to talk about the Alter Rebbe's Igeres Tshuva. And in the Igeres Tshuva, which we talked about yesterday, the epistle on Tshuva in Tanya, which is the 3rd part of Tanya, of the book called Tanya. The first part is really Tanya. The Alter Rebbe talks about the 2 different levels of Tshuva and mentions the need for first Tshuva Tata, lower level Tshuva, which is the Tshuva from bitterness, and then the higher level Tshuva Misimcha. To Neisef, in addition to the fact that which is explained, B'Igeres Tshuva, to Masha Kosov, that which we say, V'chatosi negdi tomid. David HaMelech said, my sin is in front of me always. So now what did David HaMelech mean when he said that? Because that sounds like the opposite of what we're saying. It means my failures should be in front of me all the time, and I should be not depressed, but embittered by those failures. No, that's not what David HaMelech is saying. What's he saying? This is the Alter Rebbe explaining in Igeres Tshuva. Ein mechuvan. The intention is not liyos tamid otzev nivetzed chas v'sham, is not always to be in a state of downtroddenness by virtue of my failings. Ela negdi daivka, opposite me specifically. What does that mean, opposite me? So Shalom is sitting opposite me. What does that mean? He's close to me or far from me?
Very close.
What?
Very close.
Well, not really. You're farther away than anybody else in the room because you're opposite me, right? The Neach is not sitting opposite me, he's sitting beside me, right? It's true we're in the same room, right? But you're sitting opposite, that means far away, the opposite side of the road, not the same side of the road. So the Alter Rebbe says that the Pshat, David HaMelech, is saying that my sin should always be far away from me. I know it's there, but it shouldn't be in the forefront of my consciousness, guiding everything I'm doing. I shouldn't see reality within the prism of that wrongdoing. No, I should see reality within the context of positive thought. I know there's something over there that I have to fix. Beseder, it's there. But right now, actually, might not be the time to fix it. If I'm in the middle of work and I think about something, I didn't daven Shachris well today, and I'm in the middle of work. So now's the time to sit down, stop work, take off my hat, put ashes on my head and rip my garments because of my chakras. No, I'm stealing money from the person I'm working for. He's paying me by the hour. Can't do it then. It's not the time to do it. What should I be doing now? Positively, whatever has to be happening now. I'm at work, so I'm supposed to be working, and I'm supposed to, hopefully that also includes treating the people around me with respect and with kindness and with warmth, right? So that people will be happy to be around me. Not so I'll be a good guy, so they'll be happy. Right? So that's what Chatasi Tamid Negdi Tamid means. That means far away. The Haksiv Basrei. After it says that a person should have a broken heart, and Chatasi Negdi Tamid says what? Tashmieni Sosan V'Simcha, and make heard to me joy. Sosan is usually translated gladness of heart, whatever that is. It's another word for joy. Right? Tashmieni Sosan V'Simcha, joy. There's all sorts of words for joy in Tanakh, in the Torah. 8 words for light. Each night of Hanukkah relates to one of those expressions of light.
That's for the person with broken heart.
Even the broken heart. What happens after the broken heart? David HaMelech does talk about a broken heart. The Rebbe is telling us that is not going to be so useful for us. But it's out there. It's there. The Alter Rebbe talks about it. We're going to see. Right? But even in that context, even in the context of people talking about a broken heart, talking to people for whom that might work, what does it say afterwards? Joy. Tashmeni Sasim V'Simcha. That's what comes from the broken heart. Shetekef achrei rega kotan demariris. That immediately after a small moment of bitterness, leiv nishbar v'nidke. Again, quoting the 51st chapter in Tehillim, which is all about tshuva. A broken and downtrodden heart. So there could be a moment of that, the Alter Rebbe says, as David HaMelech says. Sarach liyos, afterwards there has to be shleimus asasim v'simcha, a wholeness, a completeness of joy. Ad, to such an extent, David Naim Zmiras Yisrael. David HaMelech was the one of song who wrote the songs of the Jewish people. Omer al-Zeh, he says relative to that, Tashmeni Sasim V'Simcha. Okay, so that's the basis of it all. But the Rebbe is now going to say, furthermore. So the Alter Rebbe quotes David HaMelech, and David HaMelech says that you might need a moment of bitterness, but that moment of bitterness will lead to great joy. Right? And that,
Oh, sorry. So, shetekef is what? Shetekef?
Tekef is immediate. Tekef umiyad. Whenever the Rebbe talks about Mashiach, he says tekef umiyad. Means immediately. Right? They're both immediately. Miyad's also immediately. So immediately afterwards, there's the joy. Okay, so that's the formula that David HaMelech talks about, and that's the formula that the Alter Rebbe talks about, that the author of Tanya talks about. Okay, and that's the formula that the Rebbe is telling us that we might be able to do away with the first part of that formula, which is really quite astounding, because the Alter Rebbe says that that's a necessary part. We have one more minute. Let's do one more minute, and then tomorrow we'll go further. So we're about to see the second reason why it is that our generation should focus on simcha and not the bitterness. We'll see it at the beginning of tomorrow's shir, but let's just go a little further. In addition to the fact that when the Alter Rebbe talks about the bitterness, he talks about it as something short and momentary that will lead to joy. So even in the Alter Rebbe, there's no question, and based on David HaMelech, that the emphasis is on the joy, but there is some bitterness there. So the Rebbe says, furthermore, Hare Mavur Bigeres Tshuva Sham, Sha'tshuva mitech meriras, the tshuva through bitterness, he tshuva tata, is lower level tshuva, which we've already seen. V'tshuva misech simcha, and tshuva through joy. Actually, we're going to see the second reason right now. Tshuva from joy, he tshuva ilah, is the upper tshuva. Now there's higher level, and therefore you would think you start with the lower one and go to the higher. Now we'll just see the second answer, the next 2 lines, and then we'll stop and we'll discuss it tomorrow. Hare b'derenu zeh, in our generation, be'ikvus de Mashiach, once again on the heels of Mashiach, Achrei kol hatzaros, after all of the difficulties, v'yisurim, and the afflictions, v'chule. All of the difficulties the Jewish people have gone through in the last 2,000 years of Golas. Asher Yisurim Memarkim, they cleanse. Yisurim Mevarim, they rectify. Yisurim Mezachachim, they purify. And they elevate. Not that we want them, but that's what happens as a result of them. Hare Kol Yisrael, all of the Jewish people in this generation, in B'matzav Hachi Elyon V'Hachi Naila, are in the highest level imaginable. And therefore, the Rebbe says an amazing thing. V'shayachim le'tshuva ila daika. What's relevant for them is upper level tshuva. Shehi mitech simcha. Meaning, everybody in this generation, the Rebbe says, is on such a high level, they can actually go straight to tshuva misimcha, the upper level of tshuva, without going through the prerequisite of the lower level. Whoa, that's the second reason. Now, we'll have to talk about that tomorrow. We're not going to talk about it now because it takes a while and it's already 8:30. But there's an obvious question that we can ask now, and we'll talk about that also tomorrow. Wait a minute. The first reason was we don't have the strength for this part of tshuva. Why? Well, because we're going to get depressed. And why are we going to get depressed? Because we're so focused on ourselves, right? That seems to be on our lower level. And so we'll just get depressed because we're going to think about ourselves. And what was the difference between Mariris and depression? Mariris is, I'm thinking, for that mashal of Reuven hitting Shimon. So Mariris is Reuven feels badly that Shimon is feeling pain and he caused it. Atzvus is Reuven couldn't care less about Shimon. All he cares about is, oh my gosh, I'm no good, I hit someone. Couldn't care less about Shimon. Well, but that's the reason he hit Shimon, is he couldn't care less about Shimon. So nothing, that's not a real tshuva. It's the opposite. Same reason he did the Aveira is why he's feeling bad now. Nothing happened. Okay, we talked about that yesterday. Okay, so Mariris is the ability to focus on the fact that this negative act that I did affected someone else negatively, and that's what really embitters me. And I've also distanced myself from God. But it's not about me, per se, what I did. Okay. And we said that we won't do that. We'll just get into the me of it. Seems to be on a very low level. Now, all of a sudden, the Rebbe says we're on a very high level. Second reason seems to be exactly the opposite. We're on such a high level that we don't need Mariris, we can go straight to Simcha. Okay, we'll have to figure that out. See that tomorrow. Chaim.
I have a question regarding what you said yesterday. When we said something about